All right, we're going. We're good. So, first week done. Good.
Yay.
Did everybody survive?
Yes.
Yeah. That's just barely.
You just barely survived. Well, I'm talking about this class. Did you survive? First week's readings of this class. Yes. Okay. What'd you guys think?
Without mentioning the content, I'm just gonna say it was super hard to read.
Okay.
That the way that it's been scanned in there.
Oh.
For me, was it hard for you guys? Is it just my computer?
One of them was just smaller, and so you couldn't print it off.
Oh, yeah, might be just my
Have to
computer.
Yeah.
Because I even tried to download them, and I was like, this.
I screenshotted them and then cropped them and like put them big. I can show you.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was I had a method.
Never heard anybody say this.
If you want to see it.
So like I cropped
tried
the
to
black
Thank you for
out.
keeping an eye on
and then
the
like
chat.
it was big.
Yeah, I wanted to print it
Here's
too,
this.
but
Oh,
Huh.
hey, I never got that far. I
Okay.
had to read it
Yeah,
from
I
the
just
screen because I kept printing and it was black.
yeah, and then I
Everything was
dragged it
black.
onto a Word document and then printed it
Weird.
out.
Oh, I'll try
Yes.
that. Dragging it onto the Word
Well,
document.
We've got like
on
a
Mac,
ton
I
of
can,
other
it's in
chapters.
like preview, so I can zoom in. Can you zoom in to read?
All right. Well, I'll figure out some other way. I mean, if it's making it so difficult that like you want to print and everything, you guys want to kill trees, go right ahead.
In this
I just
instance,
honestly
yes.
like highlighting.
But I'll see what I can do. I didn't realize that it was that difficult. I think it's a color scan. So it might have been like they put it on there and hit something that it's like 11 by, not the 8 by 11.
It's not 8 by 11. No.
Yeah,
It's
so it's
smaller.
like all that black, because the black shows up on mine when I open it up. It's just like the empty scanner glass, right?
Okay.
So I'll see if I can get that out of there on all the other readings. But look, you have a method in case
I
I
will
can't.
try to copy and paste and put it in a Word document.
Okay, so let's talk about, before we dive into our riveting discussion about theory tonight, let's talk about the TIS form, because that's due next week. Yeah, next week. Was anybody able to start the process of putting in ideas and whatever? And feel free to talk about it. If you guys online or anybody in class, you want to share your TIS form, just pull it up on the screen so that we can all see it, since I didn't expect anybody to print it out and bring it. Go ahead and do that. And while you're doing that, I may or may not just be eating my dinner. But I don't feel like I can turn my camera off like you guys can. So you
I'm
just gotta
having to restart my computer
bear
because
with
my
me.
camera's not working.
Does anybody want to share their TIS?
I can share. So I came in spring last semester, and I came in on the hardest class, which we wrote our thesis. So I just basically took that as my topic. So my thesis is about, does a 3-month basic physical activity plan affect veterans who have PTSD, depression, anxieties, mental and physical health, mental and physical attributes, or I forgot how I worded it, but basically, like, does physical activity, like just basic stuff, getting out and doing stuff, in group settings and as well as individual settings, does it have any effect on their mental and physical states and stuff? So I use certain words like physical activity, or aquatic therapy, or recreational therapy. Then I put veterans, then veterans PTSD, veterans in depression, veterans in anxiety, and then I kind of just went based off of that. I primarily use PubMed or some of the other VA databases just to see, because I have access to them. And I had quite a bit of hits. It's just more, I have problems limiting it to specifically like rec therapy perspective versus PTs or OTs or other disciplines who mainly focus with veterans or people who have substance abuse or anything else in addition to it. Because if they had a co-diagnosis of something other than PTSD, anxiety, and depression, I just rule them out because it's going to skew my data. So I just kind of rule them out when I do evidence-based research stuff too.
Well, so don't feel like you can't use the information from those other fields, because if you don't already know, our field doesn't have a ton of research. What? Did I just blow your minds? Okay.
Yes.
So if you limit yourself to only looking for rec therapy published in rec therapy, you're not going to find anything or not enough. So it's okay to use that other stuff, but at the same time, you could also open up yourself to getting like 10 million hits on something, and then you still have to put parameters on it to weed it out. So there is useful things in the PT-OT literature for sure that we can use, and that's okay. There's also useful stuff in, as you're searching wider than just rec therapy, social work, psychology has lots of good information about what we do. Well, not about what we do, but about similar populations and weirdly similar activities, but they're not calling it rec therapy. So physical activity is physical activity, and we don't own that, right? And so you can find a lot of information in like the physical activity journals, which lots of people publish in that stuff, and it's not really rec therapy. So you can use that type of stuff.
So the more that I'm getting into all of this, the more I realize that we don't own anything. But nobody owns anything. I mean,
Yeah.
do they? Does PT own? I mean, PT has to own something.
Well, they think they own a lot of things.
Okay.
All right. Like at IU, the School of Public Health, like before it turned to School of Public Health,
Yeah.
they were off in their own little world, and they're like, public health is the end all be all to everything. They thought that. And so I was talking to a public health faculty, telling her what my research was, and she was like, oh yeah, that's public health. Why aren't you getting your degree in
It's
public
like
health?
everybody tries to own everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So no, but if you think about, what are some of the foundations of rec therapy? Like before rec therapy was a profession, where did people come from? Nursing, psychology, sociology. So that's where they pulled a lot of our foundational knowledge from, and then built on it and kind of created this other world of rec therapy. So do we own psychology information? I mean, where did their information come from? Is it really, I mean, that is kind of like, psych is like a pretty,
That goes pretty far back.
yeah, it's its own thing. I would say that they probably own some of their, but so yeah, in terms of PT, OT, I mean, there's a reason why we are called interdisciplinary. We work together, we share information, and so that's okay. But I don't think there's not very many fields that like legitimately own their stuff, and nobody could say that, oh, we helped contribute that theory or anything like that. Not very many. So do we need to have a little lesson about searching for articles?
Yes.
Yeah, this one was different than my past school, so I was
Okay.
confused when finding
Okay, searching for articles. I will share my screen. So when you guys search, what do you usually start with?
the Clemson Library.
Sure.
You can start with whatever you want.
Yeah, let's do that. Just throwing that out there. Really quick though, I want to be able to see our chat. If you guys could just keep your eyes on the chat, because for the person who's running class and sharing a screen, the chat sometimes gets covered up, so I don't always see it when it happens. So if people could just keep an eye. So libraries, I believe it's libraries.clemson.edu. Nope, it's not. How about just search library? /academic/libraries. Cooper Library. No, it is libraries.clemson.edu. Weird. All right. Anyways. So to search, we got some feedback. So somebody needs to mute their mic on.
It's me.
Fired. All right.
The video's still not working.
That's okay. You're here. We know you're here. I see you. Check attendance. Check. You are physically in my presence. I think I can mark you here. So for students, we can come over here searching for students if you want.
Okay, I was like going to research immediately, so.
Oh, you could do that too.
Okay, I was just.
They've redesigned their website, so this is also a little bit of a new thing for me. This is not what it looked like before. Journal title search. Journal title search. So this is looking for if you want to look for specific journals. So if you, let's see if we can find anything on therapeutic Recreation Journal. Probably not because it's not available online. Oh, look. But they likely have hard copies. Yep. But this isn't really helping you in terms of getting articles in the journal. Like, that's not going to help you find the
that's what I was
topics.
Googling or like using this today. Like it would make me click a database each time. That's why I was very confused about it.
You can select more than one database at a time.
I just wouldn't
You
do it.
can. And they really did update the library website since last time I got on here searching this summer. So let me search really quick.
No.
I'm trying to find a cord plug in that will
Weird.
switch spaces. I feel like I just trapped one.
I can move if you need.
No, I can move silly. I just trapped you.
Huh. Sorry, guys. This is totally...
It's okay. This is what I was doing like all afternoon trying to find it. Something.
Okay, so let's look up something. Let's just put a topic in.
It was my turn.
Okay.
Yoga and veterans. It found a book. And that's it.
But wouldn't you usually find more?
Yes.
Because that's what I was confused. It would only find like one item.
I know, but this is why it's so weird.
When I went to look for it, I went to research and then I just clicked databases A to Z. And then I literally just did all databases, all subjects.
Yeah.
When I limited it, it was really, really limited in what I could find.
Oh, now it can't find anything. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys how I search and then how I do my first level searching. Scholar.google.com. Yeah. Okay, this is where I start. And then from there, I will target databases. But I want to show you guys some, I have to sign in and sign out. Weird. I hope that that's my password. Dang.
That was a really long password.
It was. It's like a sentence.
Well, that's because now they make you do like a passphrase.
Yeah, they make them long.
Sorry, I never log out, but now I have to log out for our classroom.
Indy, I never felt like I had a problem finding things through Indiana's website.
So Holly just offered to share her screen to show us what she does in the chat.
Yep, hang on, we'll get there. Oh, look at that. Okay, it was a short password. We'll get to you, Holly. Hang on one sec. Google Scholar, if you go up to your settings, wherever your settings are, and go to library links, you can put in Clemson's library link. You can just type in the university. So if you're still have alumni status elsewhere, like at IU, you probably have alumni status for a while.
I do, yeah.
Then you just put in, so yep, as long as you still have alumni status. So if you just put in a university and tell it to search, it'll bring up, so IU has 8 campuses. So you put the one you have access to. So I went to Bloomington, I don't have access anymore, but I've got Clemson on there, so you can see what you do. Make sure you save your settings or it won't remember. But just to point out here really quick what this is doing is it is searching IU's website, library website, Clemson's library website, plus this Open WorldCat, which my understanding is like everything on the internet in terms of scholarly work. Okay, so that's already set and ready to go. So now we can go back to Google Scholar, do yoga and veterans or whatever. And so now over here, it will tell you if it says full text at Clemson, then we can get access through Clemson. And so if you click on that, well, I mean, right here, it's PDF. I can get it without having to go through Clemson, but say that's not there. So now it's going to log me in to the website. the university's library website, and then you can get the article by just clicking right on it. So that's usually how I do my first searches of things. I will say, don't be buying articles. If it's something that says $30 per article, don't buy anything. Don't buy anything. Okay. So Holly, this is easier than the Clemson Library, but I will say that Google Scholar is not the only place and only way you should search. I don't know what's going on. Like the Clemson Library website is totally different. In all the past times I've gotten on there, there's been on the homepage a center search bar that lets you search anything. You just type in yoga and veterans or whatever, and it'll just bring up everything, journals, books, whatever. So I'm gonna have to do some digging to find out where that went, unless somebody knows where it is. So we'll go back here. Sometimes though, we will have a subscription to a journal that does not have digital online stuff. And so it just might be hard copy in there and it'll tell you. Other times we have, we don't have a subscription, but sorry, I got to move all these little camera faces off of my page so I can see what's down below. Sometimes you can hit a request down here for a request from Interlibrary Loan, which is really nice. So we have relationships with other libraries around the country, and they may have a digital version. And so you can get a scanned copy, and sometimes it's really fast, like the next day. Other times it's really long. One time I requested a dissertation from IU, which I knew there was a hard copy version in the Hyperlibrary because I've been down there a million times, and I had checked it out before. And so I requested Interlibrary Loan thinking they'd send me the hard copy. They sent it to me on microfilm. Does anybody even use microfilm anymore? No. I think there's one microfilm reader on campus. Anyways, random, so you never know what you're gonna get from Interlibrary Loan, but you can get it almost always.
Is this what you were looking for?
Search the libraries.
But this has like articles and journals.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
It's just a search bar.
Yeah, that's what it was, just right there. Right.
Weird.
There.
Yeah. Maybe I totally missed that. So I'll go back to the library website and see if that's there. Cooper Library. Oh, geez, staring at me in the face.
Oh, it was right there.
What are you looking for? Yoga and veterans. Hey, look at that.
That's amazing.
Thanks for paying attention. I don't know. On my screen, everything is shrunk down a lot because I'm sharing. And so it didn't look the same as what yours just looked like. So look, we can get full text online, which is great. So that's just, you can then go into the databases and choose your databases. So you can choose PubMed, like Shannon did, or there are so many databases and they will give you a little descriptor of what those databases search. So there's things that search just the nursing literature, some that search just broadly health, some that psychology, sociology, whatever. So you can choose that if you want to go specific to a database, or you can just leave it broadly like this. So step one, figuring out how to do the search. Step two, I'm going to go back to Scholar, is the terms that you put in. So Shannon gave a good example of having to have this really seemingly random way of searching your words. So if you just put words in like yoga and veterans, it will pull anything for me that has the word yoga, the word and the word veterans. In whatever order, it doesn't matter. And so that's good. That gave me 15,000 results, but maybe let's try to refine it a little bit.
What was that trick with the asterisks?
Yeah. So these are called, I think they're called Boolean operators. Ooh, big words. If you put in things like quotation marks, now it's going to look for exactly that phrase, yoga and veterans. So it has to be those three words in that order. And so now that gets me down to 3. Yeah, so that might not be the right combination of words because I weeded out 14,997 things that could have been useful, but they just don't happen to have those 3 words in that order. So it's kind of like this dance of going back and forth between which terms in what order and whether you put quotations around it. I don't know all the exact ways if you do like an asterisk in the middle of something. So
just remember we learned something in May.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone.
Let's try it and see what happens. I'm going to get rid of the quotation marks. Yoga and asterisks and veterans. Back to 15,000. That's probably the same.
Isn't it that it's like the asterisk doesn't it make it like veterans?
Mhm, that's what I was going.
Sure, but whatever.
Yeah, like any
part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just got to get creative. Okay. So if you guys are totally stuck and you're pulling back like one hit, no hits, change your wording around and also use synonyms. 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 I can do it. Come on. So how about we do mindfulness? And that gives us something else. But as I'm looking through this, you know, there's probably some of this mindfulness-based stress reduction. That's probably a good thing to include in as I'm reading. So this is why it's important to use variations on the words that you're doing. So you can also change this veterans to like military and see. Now it's broadening. I'm at 24,000. So yeah, if you're still stuck, you can go to our library website, and we have a librarian who's over PRTM specifically to help students and faculty search. And his name is Bobby Hollingsworth. And he does have long hair.
Yeah.
It's like weirdly luxurious hair for a guy.
Very pretty.
Yeah. It looks very soft. Sometimes I want to ask him what shampoo he uses. Anyways, we have a librarian. That is not what I wanted. Colleges, schools, and departments. We are behavioral, social, and health sciences and PRTM. There's our department chair, and this is not what I want because where's Bobby's info? Anyways, he can help you search. I will say that he doesn't fully understand rec therapy. And so if you want help from him, you'll have to really explain a little bit more because when we say PRTM, he thinks tourism and pulls a lot of tourism stuff. So if you send him an email and say, I'm a grad student and I'm working on a project and I need help searching for literature, give him a little spiel about what you're looking for so that he has some specific terms to use, because if not, he'll just be like, whatever I think is interesting in PRTM. Not really. He's a really nice guy and very helpful. Okay, so searching. Holly, did you want to share and do the way that you do it?
Yeah.
All right.
Stop sharing my screen.
All right. Ooh. Let's see here. Let's see if I can figure it out.
Down at the bottom, do share screen, and then it gives you a couple of different options. You can just share your desktop.
Oh, okay.
Or you can share your internet, like your Internet Explorer, Chrome, or whatever you have open.
I think, okay. Yeah. So when you went to the libraries and you clicked on research, I think you clicked on the databases one, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go down, I clicked on the behavioral, social, and health sciences and found PRTM. And then if it loads, if you can see Bobby's over there.
Hi, Bobby.
Picture of Bobby with his nice long hair. And then usually I will look for articles specific to TR practices. And I know I've done like psych info and see there's one that says therapeutic recreation and health and fitness. So if you go to that, I've also done ERIC. I know I've done that one. So that's pretty much what I've done thus far. But
you can do sport discus too, because that's anything with physical activity.
Physical activity.
Good. Thank you for being on top of it. Okay, searching articles. Okay.
Yeah.
Got a chat. Yeah. If you link to Google Scholar, it really does kind of cut out some of that, oh, which database, if you're not sure about databases. But I would say still search the Clemson library in addition to Google Scholar. Wikipedia is never an okay resource. I just throw it out there. I know we all know, but making sure. Okay, so in terms of the TIS, if you haven't started it yet, now's the time to start. It is due next Wednesday. At what time?
I think it's the start of class, 6 o'clock.
Something like that. Exit full screen. Okay. I'm not going to open it. Yeah, something like that.
Is it due on Canvas or hard copy?
On Canvas, just upload it. You can attach a document, and then I will give you feedback about it. For the most part, everybody will be fine. But keep in mind that the topic that you put in there, that's your topic. So if you want to change something over the coming weeks, we have to go kind of back through this process. Yeah. And the reason for that is, again, like everything goes so quickly with what we're doing. And for the doctoral students, you guys have a draft that's due kind of like midway through the semester. And so we don't have a lot of time to just be like, I'm going to meander around an idea for a while and maybe I'll get to where I'm going. We got to go. Now, don't feel pressured that this has to be your thesis or your dissertation or anything. It would help if it were, because this is an opportunity to refine the idea. We're starting with like a big blobby idea that we're going to refine down next semester, even further refinement of that idea.
So this class is not coming up with our thesis. It's just like helping us learn how to research and helping us kind of.
Okay, so specifically to the class topic, we are learning about research applied to practice. The assignment in this class is meant to help you learn how to come up with an idea for research that is pertinent, whether you're in practice or in your graduate program, right? So, yes.
Okay.
But you're not writing a proposal that happens in the spring.
I was looking at stress management as an intervention, like my topic, but it was like too broad and it kind of like came up with everything possible. Would you like think of doing like something more specific, like a specific stress management intervention?
Good question. So if you're having a problem with too broad of an idea and you have like 10 billion hits on a search or whatever, the best way I would say to probably refine that idea is, again, think in applied to practice. Who are you working with? What are you doing? So stress management, that's what you're doing. That's half of it, but who are you doing that with?
And I was looking for people with intellectual disabilities and nothing was coming up for them. It was like parents, staff members. It was literally everything besides the actual population.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe it's not.
So one of two things is probably going on there. One of probably many things, but two that are popping into my brain right now. One, nobody's published anything about it. But as practitioners, we know that we do stress management, right, with all populations. So the protocols exist. There's just nothing published in the literature about it, which is unfortunate. So that means you found a hole, which is great. You could potentially do a study on that and start to fill a hole. But it's hard when there's nothing to support an idea because nobody has published anything on it. So where do you get evidence to support your arguments? You're going to have to use all that other literature on parents, caregivers, or staff, or whoever, all those other people, and say, look, there's all this stuff. It's likely that some of this could apply to this population as well. Those are the thoughts that came into my brain with that one.
Okay.
So
you do think it's an okay topic, or you think it's not too broad?
So intellectual disability is also very broad, and you can narrow that one down a lot. And so maybe just throw a couple specific intellectual disabilities in there in your search terms. So, and that's weird because, you know, you pick one and then
it's like on everything.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, and this might be completely off topic because I've not really looked at that population before, but I'm just wondering if there's like a lot of literature on the sensory stimulations and the sensory input, and maybe their response to stress is more expressed that way, and that's how people are addressing it. But I could be totally off too, so I don't know. I'm just saying.
I'm not sure. I
I've
can
never
look
looked
into
at
it.
that population.
Lots of different ways to look
Yeah.
at things.
And then I don't.
So if after another week or so of searching, you can't find anything to narrow that down, then, come and talk to me and we'll come up with a more narrow way to look at it, if that's really what you want to do.
Okay.
Like, I want you guys to work smarter, not harder. So use the time in class to cultivate your idea for your project, your thesis, your dissertation, and refine it. But if we get to a point where that's just becoming not feasible for the class assignment, maybe we just put that to the side and we do something that will get done in class. It's just an assignment. Try to work it out so it works for you, but if it's not going to work because you have a really complicated idea or whatever, then let's just move on to something that will get done. So I don't want you to get held up and then you're crunching to get everything done. So you have about a week to figure that out, and if it just doesn't work, then I give you another week to come up with a new idea, do the search, and turn the page in. But let's shoot for next week.
Okay.
All right, go team.
After, since this is kind of be somewhat broader, can you narrow it down as the class goes on?
Yes, it will narrow down. So this is broad right now. At this stage, we're really broad. All right, TIS next week. Good team. We're done with that one.
Does anybody else? No one else has any idea.
Does anybody else want to share their ideas? I mean, now's the time. We could all talk about it and help start the initial refining of ideas.
Is studying rec therapy's role in healthcare for pregnant women, is that too? I know there's not much research with rec therapy, but I am finding some stuff about in psychology about stress reduction and yoga stuff. But is that going to be too difficult?
So trying to do specific rec therapy with pregnant women is going to be really hard.
Yeah. Because I'm on the train of I'd like this to have something to do with my thesis if possible. That would be cool.
And so because you're in the Sullivan Center and you're doing the rural women's health and stuff like that, you want to focus on that. So I think because it's rural, I cannot say that word, rural. Rural. You're focusing on that population, right?
Not me. Natalie is the one that's usually doing the mobile clinic, and I am working with Brent's class of fitness assessments and doing fitness assessments for the people that come in to the clinic. I usually stay at the clinic.
Yeah.
And then I also do exercise groups for employees.
Yeah. So your actual job at Sullivan doesn't have anything to do with that, but that's what you're interested in, right?
Yeah.
Is rural women's health.
Maybe not necessarily rural, but women's health.
So then maybe some topics that you're searching is more health disparities. Okay. So health disparities are the things that make access to health different for everybody, for women, for people of color, for people with disabilities. So, I mean, shoot, you only have to turn on the news lately to see in terms of understanding the barriers to access, right? Okay, yeah. But for rural women, it's even worse, right? Because they live geographically in a place that doesn't have anything. Yeah. And then on top of that, they're women. And then on top of that, they might be minorities. And then on top of that, okay? Yeah. So if you Google health disparities, that's just going to explode. Okay. Or search health disparities. So if you want to, refine it a little bit more, do it for women, women's health. Yeah. Yeah. Disparities for women. Okay. Health disparities for women. Yeah, that's a term that's used a lot, health disparities.
Okay. Awesome.
I don't know how much is focused on pregnancy, but
I've just always been interested in pregnancy.
But you'll have to, but that's where, if there's all this information, I mean, if there's all this information about health disparities for women, there's got to be something in there about pregnancy. Yeah. Because that's one of our biggest health issues, right? Yeah. That's where
nowadays I feel like they talk about pregnancy a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where half of the population who has that job, so there's got to be information on it somewhere, right? Yeah. Okay.
Well, and Planned Parenthood was a huge source for pregnant women, especially in rural
who face health disparities.
Yes,
exactly. Okay, so that's the term you got to search.
Their health care could be at risk. So yeah, that would be cool.
Now tying it to rec therapy, there's probably not going to be anything.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to make the case for why rec therapy could help address health disparities in rural. women who live in rural areas.
Okay.
Look at that. I
Yeah.
already refined it. Went from like this nebulous blob of who knows to like something a little bit more refined. Did you have a question? Comment?
Oh, no, I was just going to say there's, you guys were saying that there was a lot on pregnancy, and that's because the birth rates are going down. So infertility is rising. There's a lot of stuff out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Kate, I'm tossing around some self-esteem building interventions with people in short stay rehab for substance use complications. Okay, so do you have any questions about,
But do you think that's narrow enough to be able to, because I'm having right now currently to build programming for people that are coming into short stay, long-term care, but for short stay, and it's actually tied in with Mass General Hospital. We're connecting with their ACT program, so we're trying to build. It's where they're too complicated to go into community support, but they happen, they're in the very early stage of recovery, and so we're trying to build a program within a long-term care environment to support them. And so I'm really wanting to use this opportunity to research that, to see what's out there for self-esteem building, those kind of different things that we're. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So short stay. How long are you thinking short stay?
Right now, what we're getting people generally about a 21-day stay, especially because they're on most of them are IV drug users, and so there's the the antibiotic. They're having to do a whole series of antibiotics.
And so, I'm just thinking through your idea here. What would be the reason for self-esteem?
Well, one of the things that we've been talking about with Mass General about what are some of the things that we might be able to start working on now that could help them when they do go back into the community, and either now we're moving into a 21-day or an inpatient rehab that focuses on their substance use, or into the community and they're connecting in with AA or an outpatient thing. So some of what they were suggesting is even if we could start just trying to help them kind of heal from the shame and work through kind of what's the self-esteem. So they've thrown out a couple of things: social skills, self-esteem, obviously stress management is out there too as an option. Anger management's another thing that they've suggested. And the one that I just was I feel like it's a little bit looser is the self-esteem. There's not as much good stuff that I found so far.
Yeah, so as you're putting this together and searching for what you can find, you might have difficulties in finding things specific to short stays in rehab. And so it might be better to search more broadly just self-esteem and substance abuse and substance use, and kind of see what comes up there. So you're broadening out just a little bit, and then within all of that literature, you can search a little bit more and see if there's any literature that distinguishes between long-term stays and shorter stays. But yeah, that's an idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to throw out an idea?
I'm thinking of doing researching faith-based interventions in mental health and substance abuse recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of broad. It's just that's what I have so far. But I was wondering if maybe it'd be better if I did it mental health substance abuse recovery programs that are in like a faith situation setting, so you're just delivering RT services, but yet you're also back for This is where I'm struggling with because I'm still trying to
go to the first thing that you said.
Faith-based interventions in mental health and substance abuse.
So did you search that combination of terms?
I haven't gotten to search it a whole lot yet. I did during my internship look it up a little bit, and not too much out there.
So you can break them apart then. See what is out there for faith-based interventions for health, whatever. And then, what was the population? Substance abuse? You find out a zillion, for substance abuse. But search and just see what's out there for the intervention itself, not so much the population. And then in the process of using different terms. So what else could we use for faith-based?
Spirituality.
Spirituality. You'll find something for sure with that term, spirituality.
Yeah, especially for substance abuse, because if you think about it, they like in treatment centers and they usually they like have a spirituality.
You'll find stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is part of the form. It makes you think of what some of those other terms are, and you'll search using all those combination of terms, but I think you'll find stuff.
So I'm having difficulty deciding between two different populations, and they're like kind of complete opposites.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to do either yoga with ADHD or yoga with depression. And with those two things, so I know there's symptoms of each, disorder or whatever. So if I was going to search, would I be like yoga for depression to manage like low self-esteem, or yoga for ADHD to manage short attention span, or anger management, like stuff like that? Or would you just search the disorder itself?
Yes. You start broad by searching just the disorder, and then if you want to get really specific, you can search the specific symptom. But you have to be careful that you don't like hyper focus on something that is so specific that then there might not be anything out there on yoga for give me a very specific symptom.
What I said, low self-esteem.
Low self-esteem. There might not be anything on that, but if that's a symptom of depression, obviously it is, but better than to search at the broader level of depression. So I don't want to say yes or no to either one of those. You just kind of have to see what's out there. And I would say, I would really caution everybody to getting so specific that you've only got like 5 articles of support. Because 1, that's only 5 and you need 10 for the assignment. But 2, that's just not a lot of evidence, and that's okay. I mean, we do our research to help build the body of literature, right? But when there's that little amount, 1, you have to kind of wonder why, and 2, is it going to be very easy to contribute to that in the course of this class assignment? So maybe not. So it is possible to be too specific, and then you get stuck. So there's like this sweet spot of just narrow enough and not, too broad.
I was going to say, I did my master's project on depression and yoga, and depression is a diagnosis. Yeah. And individuals can be diagnosed with depression based on the symptoms that they present in the category that they're experiencing them in. So it's like, you're never going to find anything with self-esteem and depression, and because it would just be depression, because her depression could look very different than my depression, but you're still treating depression. So that's going to be really challenging.
Yeah, so just search the broad term.
I think so.
Absolutely. Or almost self-esteem is almost a separate category when you're looking at depression.
I mean, and I agree with that, because there are so many interventions that target self-esteem regardless of the broader issue, right? And so then you can get complicated when you're trying to,
you're really looking for mood variances and instability and mood improvement when you're talking about depression.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Some synonyms for depression is mood and mood disorders and emotional stability, things like that. And so that will help you, give you a lot. And so you'll probably read stuff that has ties to specific symptomology. They'll talk about it in the articles, but that might not be like in the title or something like that.
Okay.
So I think you'll find the information, just not that specifically in a title. Okay, so Jake threw in here, I want to look at the difference in social skill functioning concerning traditional athletes versus unified athletes and special O's. Can you say what unified athletes is? I don't understand that. Bueller? Bueller? Are you typing or are you going to talk? Jake? Uh-oh. I can't hear you.
Sorry. So traditional athletes are athletes who compete, they practice with each other and compete against other athletes in the Special Olympics. A unified team, they practice with partners and not just a coach. So they practice with a partner and with the coaches, and then they compete against other unified teams. So I wanted to look at the social skill functioning, or the difference of the level, or the differences in.
So then your assumption is that one of those groups has more or less social skills because of the characteristics of the interactions in the group, right?
Correct.
And so which one would you think has more?
The unified, because they're paired with someone who, like, I am a unified partner, and I compete in the Special Olympics. I've won several medals, but with just my hypothesis is that with just having a coach to help, or you learn social skills from, it's not like a one-on-one, but with a unified partner, like, you have someone who's constantly, like, there with you and can help you. So I think that the unified athletes would have higher social skill functioning levels than traditional athletes.
Yeah. I think you might have, and I don't really know, but I'm just guessing, some difficulties finding published information about comparing traditional versus unified on a lot of stuff. Have you already for this?
Because unified teams it's a relatively new thing.
Okay.
Like 10-ish, 15 years or so.
So how would you explain what unified teams are without saying the words unified teams?
That would be pretty easy. You want me to do it right now?
Yeah.
Right on.
Like, how would you because I don't know that you'll find anything with that exact term, unified teams. And so what other terms could you use that are similar to what you're talking about, but might not use those terms?
Special Olympics and partners, or volunteers.
Are there volunteers for the traditional teams and traditional athletes? Are there volunteers that are there helping?
Coaches, yes.
Okay. So it might be difficult to distinguish whether those volunteers are connected to a traditional team or a unified team unless it says it in the literature. I think this is a good idea. I'm challenging you to think of other ways to search for that, because the sentence that you wrote there is really specific, and that's fine, but I think that it will potentially limit you in the search. And so just challenging you to broaden the terms, the phrases that you use to search. So unless those are phrases, traditional athletes versus unified athletes, that are totally commonplace to Special Olympics, like everybody would know what you're talking about if you just threw that out. Is that the case? Does everybody really know?
In Special Olympics, yes.
Okay, so if there's people who publish a lot in the Special Olympics literature, then maybe that would be a bit easier to search than I am thinking off the top of my head. But so I think a broader area that you might search, not differentiating between the type of athletes, would just be social skills amongst individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities.
That's pretty much where I've gone in my research so far, because I took the research methods class in the spring, and just
so that's the broad
that class.
That's the broad searching, and that's a good place to start. But then to narrow it down, you add in this athlete piece, but you have to be really creative with how you search the athlete element. But I think that's interesting. Good job.
Thanks.
Hold on, let me read all this chat just happened. Somebody was going to say something. Go ahead while I read the chat.
I was just going to say for Jake, possibly looking at using the word inclusion in your searches. It may not be like exactly, because a lot of it's used in like education, but I feel like the unified athletes very much embodies what like an inclusive education would look like. So maybe inclusion in like sports or something like that might give you some good research too.
Yeah, good call on the inclusion piece. Okay, I'm reading the chat. Music and memories. Yay. Yeah, if you go down the music and memory road, Holly, I think you'll get a lot of information there. It's growing a lot. I don't know what rigorous research has been done in that area, but I think there is a growing body of evidence there. Okay. Cool. All right. Look at that. A resource in class. Okay. Anybody else want to share anything, or should we take a break real quick and move on to our next topic? Heather, you look like it's like on the tip of your tongue there.
I know. I'm literally just mind mapping my
Okay. Okay. Let's take a break for about 5 minutes. Come back at 7:05, and then we'll talk about theory. Yay! I'm gonna eat my dinner. It's now cold. Cold Panda Express. Yeah, but I don't think this is not microwavable material.
I was like, does it work? Like, do I need to know about this?
I have a key to the kitchen, so.
There's a kitchen?
Yeah.
I didn't know like anything about this building.
Oh, I still don't get it. I just walk around until I find someone's office. I don't know where to go.
Or 2 squares here.
2 squares. Oh, okay. This is gonna be helpful.
Within these 5, you can have 3 others in that. It's decreased mood, and then anhedonia.
So right now this is us.
Perfect, correct.
Okay.
Anhedonia. It means the lack or reduction of interest.
Here's my Henry's office.
This is what I sold my We're at
Okay.
We're a perfect fit.
This is the
We're treating
square.
somebody with
Okay.
depression. We can treat 1 to 2 very specific elements
That they have to
in
have
the
the right
diagnosis.
here. This is the grad office.
So I don't know if that helps,
Okay.
but anhedonia, yeah. Anhedonia
This
is
is the forestry square.
which I think for right here.
Halfway down the forestry square is a hallway that goes to the
Is that a
elevator.
decrease?
Yeah, I always make arrows.
I didn't know
Yeah.
there was an
Working
elevator.
in as a clinician.
And then there's
With
an
my
elevator.
internship, when I was in the hospital,
Oh, yeah.
we did
You do shorthand.
yeah, and like I use that
Exit right here.
for med
And this
yeah,
goes
yeah.
over to
So,
the pool.
You got it.
So this is the DNA.
Oh yeah. That's where my office is.
Yeah. So you always walk through this
That's
breather
awesome.
and then you come down the hall.
I didn't know that they were connected.
I didn't know they were.
So
It's just 2 squares.
Ah.
It doesn't seem like it because it's like
Has that.
It's like a maze.
But it's
Yeah.
not really.
Like,
It
there's
really
just
is.
Like 1 square or 2 squares.
Oh.
So there's a set of stairs that goes out right here.
Yeah.
Stairs.
Yeah, that's
And
the
then
stairs I
there's
know.
those stairs that goes out right
And those stairs. I know those 2 stairs.
And
Stairs that comes out right here.
outlet.
And
She
the
doesn't
DNA
do
stairs here.
Wow. I'm gonna take a picture of this.
So wait,
my bad.
someone said there's like a fridge in the
Yes,
bottom
station
of this building that we are supposed to keep our stuff in.
She's got
Didn't they say that in the?
Okay, let me clarify. This is on this floor.
Yes.
If you're not on this floor, Lahotsky, and it connects differently on the
Yeah.
They were like talking about how their fridge was cleaned out, don't get it dirty. I was like, what fridge?
Yeah. I won't mess with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then I was assuming there's like a kitchen somewhere.
Yeah.
It's right here. Like you walk out right here.
That's where I met with Dr. Lewis when I came in.
There's a tiny little conference room
Yeah.
back there. The kitchen's
There's
right
like
on.
little couches.
I-
Yeah, that's where I met with
it's,
Dr.
Is it open during the day? So if I wanted to use a microwave,
Everybody can use it.
so I could like
That's
heat my
cool.
food up.
like it's so hard to
That'd be cool. That'd be nice.
Well, I'm here all day Tuesday, Thursday, so it's like I bring a sandwich right now. So it's so hard to get my food up. So that is nice.
Yep. Squares of Lahotsky.
So what? I'm finding a lot of stuff about health disparities for women.
Uh-huh.
But how
Looking
can
that while you were searching in class while you're sitting here. Yeah. Way to go.
Well, that's awesome.
What I'm like wondering is what rec therapy's role could be
That's the challenge.
in helping that. Like, would rec therapy apply to like empowering the individuals to?
Part of that class.
Yeah,
That's my
self-esteem,
favorite
Yeah.
class. I
self-esteem,
sang all of my
like
points and
anything,
and I do
right?
remember this specific PowerPoint
Yeah.
slide, and it was like, these are all of the symptoms.
And
you have.
access.
I mean,
So-
think if you
No,
were
it's like
bringing them in a
perfect,
room,
and
what
it's
would you
like,
want to do with them?
It's like
Yeah.
listing all the symptoms, and it said like in order to have depression, you have to have at least.
Yeah, I guess it could be like a
I went through all of them. With, like, major
mental
depressive, and then what's
thing.
the other one?
Dysthymia.
Yeah.
Low grade, but constantly there.
Yeah.
It's a lot of my
So
I'll probably
part of
have to
this
review that
process
part,
is
but I don't
learning
know if I'm gonna
some
do
about
it.
your population,
I'm not sure
learning more
each
about your
because
population. So
Yeah.
we talked about rural women.
yeah.
The health disparities literature
I
is
know,
going
I
to
don't know,
open
because
your
it's
eyes
really-
to what their experiences are
Like,
like.
I feel like all these
Right?
people,
And so maybe
like,
through
in my
the
internship,
process of
someone's like,
reading all that
"Oh, I love
literature, you
these
start to
little
formulate this idea of how rec therapy can help them.
Yeah,
gonna find
yeah.
something
Well, and it's actually great
That's what I
because
You'll
well,
find it.
my
Okay,
boyfriend,
you'll find
his
So
sister,
maybe for this class, I should just not worry
she
about
lives
it.
in
And
Harlem.
yes,
She
you can
moved
learn
from she's involved in social work, but she lives in Harlem now. And his mom is in social work, but his sister does a lot of stuff for like racial and social justice. Right now, she's like traveling all over the country, advocating for all kinds of stuff. So she's a good source. She would know a lot about this kind of stuff. So I think it would be good because I have people that I can. Well, she used to live in Durham too, and was involved in mental health advocacy for underprivileged people in Durham.
I'm not really sure how the mobile clinic,
with you.
the plan is that the rec therapy is offered through the mobile clinic. I don't know if it's happening yet.
Yeah, I don't honestly know.
That'd be awesome.
that
That
looks
would
like.
be your research, and then you get to
Yeah, I
go
get to
do
go.
that.
But the thing is, that's so. My professional possibility is rec therapy education. So I made it pretty clear to Audrey that I'd love to be able to work with the undergrads in doing the fitness assessments with them and all that. So I'm the one, Natalie goes on the mobile clinic and does like Haven of Rest and all this stuff. That's I think it's like a halfway house for women.
Yeah, that's
coming
why I'm
from
interested in my research is the
Oh, well, Natalie's that goes there every week. They did a guided meditation today. She said it went really well. But she's doing the mobile clinic and I'm doing the clinic. So
She's not doing her research with them, so
that's true.
it's not off limits to you.
Yeah.
Nothing is off limits. I mean, maybe for assistantship duties, that's
Well, yeah.
but
yeah.
for your research, it's not off limits.
Cool.
That's an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, that
Like
would be
right
cool.
there.
Mhm. Well, and they go all over the place too. Interesting.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. They didn't have any ice up in Hendrix, so I just got Coke out of the fountain, and it's grody.
Brody. Since you do the fitness assessments, are you coming to Brent's class tomorrow?
I am.
I'm gonna be there.
Are you in that
I'm
class?
his TA.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going with well, Audrey's gonna be talking mostly because I don't
Yeah.
started a week ago. But yeah, Audrey and me and Natalie are gonna come.
Very
I'm pretty sad that I have to get up. So really
cool.
don't
So I was just telling my husband, I was like, this is amazing. Like I don't have to do anything before 9 a.m. ever. And then Brent was like Wednesday. He was like, so what are you doing at 8 o'clock? On Tuesday, Thursday. And I was like, doing whatever you tell me to, basically. So he does his after it's 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Well,
So I was like, nope, my workouts just went out the door.
Yeah.
I've got classes at 8 a.m. So, but then you get a parking spot on campus if you
Yeah,
get there.
I've been here 7:30 Monday through Friday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Trying to get a parking spot for a 9:30 class is
Impossible.
For Fran's class.
Yes.
I take a bus.
I can't.
I just like
Well,
the
that's-
pit was full
I was
today
like,
and
I go to 8 a.m.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like it's actually a reward.
Yeah.
Half of my class dropped out. Like literally, we already lost half the class. I was
What
like,
class
That's
is
kind of
it?
typical of stats.
Oh,
though.
stats. Yeah.
well, what are they gonna do? Just drop out of grad school?
Some do.
We don't.
I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
very
supposed to be
intimidated by it, but I was like, I guess I've been here.
I know.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
But then
it's
I already
like
looked for a
shock
tutor,
that
and they don't have
take it.
tutors. And then it's
Grab
like,
a study group. Grab whoever. We have met for 3
But I don't know
hours
if we
already
could
this
do
week.
that
My
since
study
we're
group and I just
focused on-
grab
I don't know.
people.
Wow.
hopefully,
Yeah,
all these
they're
people,
intense.
all these people are like, well, I've already taken like the upper level, but I was required to take this class. I was like, she's like, yeah. I was like, she's like, yeah. And he was like, great. So you could pretty much be teaching it. I was like, great. I'm gonna ask her to tutor me.
No, do.
They're like
I think that's how
$20
you
an hour here.
I think that's
like,
how
what?
only how you get through stats. I just convinced of it. Just study
I
with
guess
partners.
I'm like missing Western where tutors is free.
Right. I thought they did have tutors
It's
here.
like for like the undergraduate classes, only like 5%. And then they have a tutor match program where they like match you up with a tutoring partner, but it's like $10 to $30 an hour.
I know, right?
Oh,
That's
wow.
all masters and PhD students trying to make a living.
Yeah.
Right.
And I didn't see any stats.
Thomas is tutoring next. He's a writing tutor next semester, so he's gonna be one of those people getting paid.
Probably.
Yeah, hopefully to pay them well.
I think it's like they set their standard.
Wait, is Thomas here, Thomas? Like the guy?
No, he's in the English department.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
Thomas.
he's my man candy.
Okay.
Yeah. I never know what to call him. We've been together like about 4 years, but it always sounds weird to be like, my boyfriend.
You could say my significant other.
Yeah. Sometimes I say partner. I never know. So I usually call him man candy.
Man candy. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah. I used to call him that exclusively when we started dating, and he really didn't like it, so I stopped. But now it doesn't matter. It's been together long enough where it doesn't. I don't care if he likes it.
Right.
My man candy.
All right, everybody, let's come on back. Oh, all I see are little tiles of faces, of no faces. Mm.
Much better.
I love it. It's just sparkling juice.
Oh, you guys had them here for us in May for the residency visit.
And nobody drank them, so I took them all home.
I drank the cranberry one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what brand is it so I can buy it?
Izzy.
Oh, I love
I
Izzy.
know, they're so good.
They used to only be in the bottle, right?
Yeah, I didn't know they had
I never
cans.
seen them in a can.
Wow, you guys are funny.
They're
So
so
exciting.
No, they were so good.
Yeah, they are good. It's just juice and sparkling water. So.
I'm down for it.
But it's not like the LaCroix that are just sparkling water.
I hate
It's basically just salt water. I don't know how to drink it.
Honestly,
You don't like
so
that?
I have
I
been
really like the
drinking
the
diet
cherry
soda
one.
for my entire
Maybe I
life, and
drank
I'm
that one,
finally
but that
trying to
one
get
was
off
like
diet
that.
soda.
Yeah.
So I've just like forced myself to drink LaCroix, and I don't like
It's
it.
gross.
But now I've like, I think, numbed my taste buds enough to like be able to
Yeah.
drink
It
it.
has to be super cold.
It tastes like,
Like,
literally
I like
water
the
Sprite
mango.
that's like old to me.
It does taste like that. My favorite, the apricot's pretty good. The passion fruit's really good, and the mango's good. But I don't like a lot of the
Salt
others.
water to me. All right, this is fascinating, but we do have to move on. Okay, so let's talk about theory and how we know what we know. So I'm going to put that question out to you guys. How do we know what we know? As practitioners, as just human beings on this earth, how do we know what we know?
Because of theories.
Okay,
Because someone told us to know that.
somebody said this is how we do it.
Yeah.
Experiences in life.
Life
Trial and
taught
error.
us some things.
Our education.
I touched a stove and that is hot. Now I know not to touch that, right? Okay, so life experience, we've learned some things, but how did that knowledge get generated in the first place to then be taught to us?
Research.
Storytelling.
They were taught, yeah.
Tradition.
And then Grant's philosophy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, so yes, yes, and yes to all of your answers. Experience, knowledge passed on from one person to another. You know, we could say research, the big R word, you know, a scientific process of producing some knowledge. Okay, so yes to all of that. Experiments, things. Okay, so let's just quick review. What are the sources of knowledge? This came directly out of the readings, but let's talk about them.
Tradition, that was one of them.
Okay, so what does that really mean?
Basically just doing what you've always done, what is known to be true, I guess, and never like testing other new possibilities, just
That's right.
relying on people telling you that, oh yeah, I've done that and that works, so you know you can keep doing that.
That's right. So someone tells you what to do and it's always been done that way. There's no new creation of knowledge or anything like that. It could potentially stifle any new knowledge development because that's not how we do it here, right? How many times have you heard that potentially in practice? Well, that's not how we do it.
Yeah, entire internship.
Yeah.
Definition of internship.
So, yeah, tradition. Great. Looking on here, Holly, authority. Okay, so people who specialize in a certain area, right? So who would be an authority that you would have heard things from?
You. Teachers.
Okay. Teachers, yes. I always like to think of your parents. Who's that motivational speaker guy with the perfect teeth? Tony Robbins? Wow, you guys have no idea who I'm talking about. Moving on. Okay, so authority, that's right. People who have expertise in something, and so they are respected as an authority, as an expert in that area, and so they tell you something and you say yes. When Fran tells me something, I say yes. Right? There are a lot of people who have authority. Shannon, I'm assuming that that's what you're talking about, or are you talking about my comment about perfect teeth?
Your comment of describing a white male with perfect teeth who's a motivational speaker.
A lot of people verifying that. Thank you. But there are a lot of people who have expertise too. Okay, so what's another 2 or 3 sources? What do we got in here?
Trial and error.
Okay, trial and error. So
doing something over and over, depending on like if this works, good, but if it doesn't work, you just keep going back trying.
Very time consuming.
The interesting one too, or the interesting part about that to me was that it said like you can't ever say if you use trial and error there when you finally find one that is successful, you quit because you found one that's successful, but it might not necessarily be the best one because you didn't continue to find out.
And I feel like the trial and error is very resource intensive and has a lot of impact on people, because how many times does it go wrong? And if we're talking about like human interaction and human trials on humans about things, how many people did you error on in the process of finding your success?
It's in Grey's Anatomy. They're doing a brain thing and he kills like 12 people before he gets the right one. It's like,
I thought about.
Well, for sure, way back in the day in research, before there were research ethics panels and such, they just, I'm going to give you this incurable disease and I'm just going to throw things at you and see which ones work and which ones don't. And a lot of people died.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's a good way to do it, but that's how a lot of our medications today and our medical procedures today came about, is through trial and error. Yikes. Okay, so Gina, reasoning. So deductive and inductive reasoning or logic. So explain deductive and inductive? Big words.
Those have always confused me. Yeah.
So in deductive, it says syllogism. Major premise, minor premise, and a conclusion.
So it goes from like
philosophy.
It's the thing that all living things must die.
Is that what it's broad to specific?
Yep.
Yeah. And the other one's specific to broad.
Yeah, so I kind of think about it as deductive reasoning is like this logical process of A plus B equals C. If this is true, and if the premises are true, then the conclusion is true. So I think the example is, I can't remember.
All living things must die.
Yeah.
A man is a living thing.
Exactly.
Therefore, all men must die.
Exactly. So the more specific and the more true those premises are, that all living things die and man is a living thing, the more specific and true those are, the more likely the outcome is what it is actually going to be happening. So you're right. It's broad, very down to very specific. So the flip then is that in an inductive reasoning is that we start specific with facts we have observed, and we generalize that out. So inductive reasoning is really like the basis for the scientific method, which is what? Another type of knowledge, but what's the scientific method? We observe something. We observe something. We make a hypothesis. We test it, which means we gather facts and data, and then we make a conclusion based off of that, right? Yes. So logic is the foundation of research and scientific method. Okay, so all of this contributes to how we know what we know, right? Are any of these necessarily right or wrong? in terms of producing knowledge? Not really. Some are maybe preferable over others. I don't want to harm people in my trial and error process, but you know, we're figuring out haircuts for my daughter, and we have just learned through trial and error that she has curly hair in the back. We will not cut her hair short anymore because it requires me to blow dry and, you know, do all that. And I don't have time for that. Okay. So no harm done there. Right. But there are other things that could harm people that I would rather not do in my life. I'd rather not blow dry her hair every day either, but whatever, I've learned. Okay. So we learn from all of this. It all contributes to our knowledge, and it's all useful in some way or the other. So then what is basic and applied research? What's the difference between the two? Well, what are they and what's the difference?
Basic, you're just testing a theory, versus applied, you see a problem and you do something to solve it.
Okay, basic is just testing a theory, and applied is seeing a problem and solving it. Close. The basic one is not quite accurate. Anybody want to try to refine her answer a little bit more?
Isn't it just like knowledge for the sake of knowledge? Like, I mean, this doesn't have like an ending. It's just like, I found this, so, you know, it's not solving the problem, I guess. It's just.
You may use a theory in the process of doing basic research to learn about something and help interpret something. But yeah, it's just knowledge for knowledge's sake. We're just generating knowledge, producing facts, understanding relationships, whatever. But exactly what you guys said, applied is then kind of taking it to this next level, right? And solving a problem using research. So are these really two different things? Two totally different types of research?
No, there's over.
I feel like start with basic to get to applied.
It's a continuum. Basic, I think basic research sets the foundation for applied research. We have to have the knowledge first in order to address problems, right? We can't just be like, I see a problem, I know nothing about it, and I know nothing, and I'm going to solve it, right? So we've got to go and search through our knowledge base and see what there is to know about that problem and that setting and that situation and whatever, and then we can come up with some way to potentially solve that problem. But if we didn't have that whole foundation of knowledge, how would we go about fixing the problem? It'd be a lot harder. I don't even know if it'd be possible, but quite difficult. Okay, so basic and applied research are not these two, it's not opposite ends of a spectrum and that aren't even on the same spectrum. It's a continuum and they do overlap. Okay, so the key here that we're talking about in terms of this class is solving problems in practice. Okay, using research to solve problems in practice. So what are some potential problems that you may have seen in your practice, in your internships or whatever that you think research could solve? We've got a lot of practitioners online, so you guys, I'm sure, have opinions, and whatever you say about your workplace stays in class and may be recorded for posterity, but I won't share that recording with anybody. So what happens in class stays in class. All right.
Finding alternatives to bingo.
Okay. So
I played a lot of bingo.
Where were you working again?
A nursing home.
Yeah. Okay. So expanding our options, our activity, interventions,
things that are more effective.
You got to speak loud.
Were you with a rec therapist playing bingo?
I was the rec therapist. But they wouldn't let me discontinue bingo or limit bingo. We played bingo every single day.
So they didn't have like an activities director or
that was me.
For that.
Yeah,
that was
my title was therapeutic recreation director / activities director. Yeah, but basically I was an activities director.
Because they wouldn't let you.
Because I didn't really have a choice in what I was doing.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned having bingo 3 times a week instead of 7 days a week, and there was like uproar. Yeah.
Is this a job or your intern?
This is my job.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when they hired you, they already had all the activities.
Oh, everything was already.
And they just told you what to do, basically. So you weren't able to did you assess people?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So okay, I think I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it was. I would not call it rec therapy.
Okay, so good example. Problem in practice is not having. I mean, there's multiple levels here in terms of what the problem is. You have a management problem, but exactly. Okay, so somebody commented, Gina, not being seen as glorified CNAs. Okay, so similar, just not being used for what you actually are. Any other examples of problems that you've seen in practice of where you guys work or anywhere?
Technically, for the government, when working in the VA system, you don't have to have your CTRS to be a rec therapist. So certain VA hospitals don't require it.
Interesting. And what VA are you at?
Well, I'm at Nashville. So like my VA requires it because I had a CTRS supervisor, but I have 2 on staff who are quote unquote grandfathered in, who just have, one of my coworkers is absurd. He has like a PE education and he's a rec therapist, but he hopefully is retiring. So they're like at that stage. But at certain VA hospitals, they don't, like if you read the job descriptions, they don't require you to have CTRSs unless they made it to state that.
And that would probably coincide with what state you're in and whether there's licensure. So there's a lot of things that are in states that don't have licensure that require CTRS, and great, they are above, their standard is higher than others. But if you're a VA in a state with licensure like Utah, North Carolina, or New Hampshire, and Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma's almost. Oklahoma has it, I think. Or they're close. Yeah. It's really.
But you know what? Some states, even though they have licensure, you're not necessarily required to hold that in order to have those positions. So it is one of the things. I think there is an issue with being recognized, a difference with rec therapy and what we do, and what the diversionary activities are. And it's really tough too, because you're actually in people's homes, and so there has to be a balance with what people's preferences are and what they want, but then also being able to bring in the therapeutic side for those that could greatly benefit from that side. And I think until there's a lot more advocacy and a lot more evidence of why people should be certified and have that we're going to continue having, in the state of Massachusetts, you only have to have an interest to be an activity director. I mean, it's like so basic, and that's a pretty progressive state.
Yeah, so there are only 3 states with licensure, and those states do dictate to some degree hiring practices, but that doesn't mean that everybody follows them. And I would guess a VA in those states probably are a little bit more legit, because it's not really the government. It is the government, but not the government, but you understand. But for example, I worked in a state with licensure and was not licensed or even certified as a rec therapist. And I worked as a rec therapist, so there are still places in those states that don't follow those rules. But so this is, again, a higher level practice problem where in our field, we don't have licensure across the board. And Kate, you mentioned, evidence for why licensure is important and stuff like that. We don't have a lot of that. I mean, we have a lot of people talking about it and getting angry about it. And there's always something going on at ATRA talking about licensure, right? But I don't know how many studies have been done that say, comparing the effectiveness of treatment between people who are licensed and certified and practicing, as opposed to, Joe Bob off the street who has an interest in activities and is the rec therapist, and the outcomes of his practice, right? Compared to somebody who has a degree and is licensed and certified.
And I'm constantly in that place of being asked that, because, I'm trying to advocate for our field, and I've got people saying, well, where's the evidence that this person who is very interested in it and has been in this field forever wouldn't have at least as equal outcomes as this person that you're saying has a degree? It's a tough place. And so, it's a lot of it's about reimbursement too. There is the O section that we could be filling out. And if you're looking at where there's some practice issues, because we aren't tied to reimbursement now, we can't even calculate how many minutes of therapy we're doing. So that's another reason why, we're really just not viewed in the rehab area.
Mm-hmm. So you guys all listed really high level issues in practice. I'm going to give you an example of a more, down to earth, more very specific applied example, because this is what really made my brain click when it came to research and practice when I was a practitioner. So I was working in wilderness therapy in treatment, and the program that I worked in is a mandatory 30-day program, but usually the average stay was around 45 days or so in the summer, and then 60-ish to 70 days in the winter, because the cold made their brain shut down and everything went slower. Okay, so they called this family therapy, but the only person in the treatment program was the kid, right? So where are the parents and siblings at home doing family therapy? And what was that? A once or twice a month phone call with the therapist. The kid got weekly sessions with the therapist, and then kind of this daily stuff from us, because we were running the groups out in the woods. And so I never saw this as really being family therapy. How could you call this family therapy when they're not here doing all of the hard work of the therapy? The kid's doing all the hard work. And I realized the kid is in treatment for a reason, and many of them had, a zillion issues, and it's a good reason why they're in treatment. And it's not necessarily that the parents need to be in treatment. Although I did meet a lot of parents that I was just now I know why your kid is the way that you are. Okay, but so let's say you are part of the reason why your kid is the way that they are. You send them off to a treatment center. They're there for 30 to 45 days. They make all these great changes, and then they come home to a family that's the same family in the same situation, and the parents haven't really done much. The siblings haven't really done much to change, right? And then they've got all the same friends in the same neighborhood, and my drug dealer still lives down the street, and I can just walk up there and find whatever I need to find. What are the chances for relapse? Really high, really, really high, right? And that was happening. I mean, I don't know what the percentage was, but, and this program said that they had really good rates of not having relapse because of their treatment and everything, but I still felt like you're sending these kids home to the same environment with no changes. Yeah.
In my internship, we had 7 units in our hospital, and I was only there for 3 months, and within each unit, I saw at least 12 of the same people come back 3 different times.
In and out.
Discharge, come back, and it was in different units. It wasn't like it was just a substance abuse unit. It was depression and psychosis, and even the dementia. Because they'd go home and they didn't have the supports there. Exactly.
It's really high.
Yeah.
It's really high. And I was like, is everyone okay with this? Even other staff, oh, well, so-and-so's back again. Oh gosh. They'd be all mad and stuff. I'm like, this is a problem.
Well, so the issue that I really took with it is that they were calling it family therapy.
Yeah.
I didn't feel I worked there for 5 years. I didn't feel like there was a whole lot of family therapy going on. So I went to grad school and was thinking, well, dang, there's got to be a way that we could develop some type of programming within this company, this program, that links the parents to the process a little bit more. Because the kids go out there and they get all these rough edges shaved off, and then they go home and they're in a good place, maybe not, back to perfect functioning or perfect, right? But they're in a better place than when they came here. They're not going to end up dead in a gutter, which is what a lot of parents told us that they were at that point with their kids. But then there's no change here. So during my master's program, as part of my thesis, I developed a family intervention, family therapy, sessions and such for this program to be able to link them to what their kids were doing. And then I implemented it and tested it and wanted to study what the long-term outcomes were. That took a whole lot longer than what I could do in my thesis, and so I had to kind of cut it off, so I never saw what the end product was. But that was the first, I see a problem. I'm in grad school, so I now have the skills. I now have these research skills to figure out a way potentially to fix this problem, right? And I learned that it's a whole lot harder than it seems to write this out on paper and design this program and how to figure that out. But that's where it really clicked to me that you can use research to fix practice.
So
be patient with me on this.
Okay.
With the research that we have now, because we don't have a lot of rec therapy research, but when we were looking at stuff earlier, there's a ton of research on stress management. There's a ton of research on veterans and yoga and all of these things. And you guys are producing research as faculty here. So why the research, not you guys specifically.
Calling me out.
No, not you specifically. Let me take that back. So why isn't there more research from recreational therapists, faculty, whatever, saying, okay, so here's basic research, here's the knowledge. Now let's do applied. Now let's do, if you're a recreational therapist, here's the intervention, here's what works, here's the benefits, and let's claim it and
That's
say
like
it's rec therapy and put it out there.
The bajillion-dollar question right there.
Really?
Yeah, it takes a long time to do the type of research that produces like the hard and fast knowledge of this is the best practices. And so, I mean, we do have to do research as our jobs as faculty members. You know, if I don't do enough research and publish enough articles, I will get fired in 2 years. And so, you know, it's going to be stressful for the next couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to your life as a future,
yeah,
your future life as a faculty member.
I'm trying to like connect things in my head.
No,
as to
so
what my life is going to be for the next.
Some people really like applied research. I like applied research. So everything that I do, I'm doing my research in a facility with rec therapists who are practicing, because that's where my interest area lies. Some people don't like that applied research. They want to be up in like abstract land where they just want to produce knowledge.
Because it's somewhat easier.
It is somewhat easier.
So I said somewhat.
Somewhat easier, quite a bit cheaper.
Okay.
And it's really hard to get into facilities to get access to our populations to study, right? So that's probably one of the biggest barriers, especially for me doing veterans research, is getting access to the population. So, I mean, Shannon, you could weigh in on this probably better than anybody else, but the VA does not play well with non-VA people, non-VA researchers. So I'm not a VA researcher. I don't work for the VA, and so I can't do research with VA populations because they've got rules about that, and you can't get in. So how do I get access to veterans?
So what have you been using?
I have connections with non-VA programs that serve veterans. And it took me years to cultivate those relationships.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so that's how I get access. I would love to be able to be like, hey, Shannon, let's do something together and put together a quick study about the impacts of rec therapy at specifically your VA, or maybe let's connect a whole bunch of VAs or something like that. But I can't get in.
Would they do that for someone like a PT or a PT, or is it just right there?
Anybody. Now, Shannon, as an employee of the VA, you could do a research. My understanding is that you could do a research study because you work for the VA. You're already in there. I don't know if you have to have some type of special designation as a researcher for the VA, but
You all have study with her?
I don't know.
What was the question?
If you did a study, if you started a study at your VA, put it all together, and you were the principal investigator, could you ask me to be on the study with you, or am I still barred from doing stuff with you because I'm not a VA researcher?
So it's like a fine line. So say, for example, there's kind of a conflict of interest because Jasmine's my professor. I go to Clemson.
Okay, well, let's say that's not the scenario.
Okay, so like if we are at two different universities, two different altogether kind of a thing, essentially it could happen. Like right now, like for example, like I'm going through my thesis project. And so like when it comes to our research department, our IRB, there's two different routes you can go. And so like Nashville, we're right next to Vandy. And so we have a big partnership with Vandy. And so if they come from Vandy, it's like a simple, easy process. But it's like with other schools, we have to create a affiliation agreement, a partnership. And then we have to also clear it with the veterans and whatnot. And so since I have veterans, I'm kind of double dipping into that sense. But like, I guess it would be more of the sense of Jasmine would probably come in as like a volunteer. And so she would go through the volunteer process. And then when she's been clearance-wise, she can come through. And then we would have to go through like HIPAA training. And it's more of the sense of like not that she can't partner with me. It's just it's going to take a year to do anything before we even start the idea, like the training, all that stuff. Like when I work with nonprofits in my community, like I'm technically supposed to have an MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding, that if something goes south, that there will be coverage, or it will not go into like bad PR or like bad anything. Like the VA is very cautious about image because we already have such a bad image to begin with. So it would probably be of that standard of like creating the agreement, making sure she goes through the training, making sure everything's gone through the training, and we are HIPAA compliant and compliant with PR levels, as well as compliant with IRB on multiple like fields, like Clemson, VA, federal, like everywhere kind of a thing. So it's possible and it's plausible, but it's more in the sense of, is someone really going to try and do it? Like,
I'll tell you guys now, I don't have the time for that. So if I have 6 years to publish enough to get tenure, I'm not going to spend a year trying to get access.
Right.
When if I already have an agreement with someone like Outward Bound, who has a veterans program in there, or I don't even have an agreement, but I got a friend there and I can say, hey, how could I do this? And it would take 1 month for me to go through a process to get access to their veterans, as opposed to a year for access to the VA. I mean, I'll get more people from the VA for sure, because there's more people there. They serve more people, but I don't have time for that. So why don't more faculty members do this applied research? Is one, their interest, and two, access. We have a huge problem with getting access. And so anytime it's a hospital, there's likely going to be an IRB associated with that hospital. And some places that have their own IRB process will defer to the university's clearance, but other places won't. So then you're going through 2 IRBs. And so the hospital may say, well, you need to change this and this and this. And then Clemson is saying, well, so you make those changes and then you send it to Clemson and they look at it and say, well, why did you change this, this, and this, the stuff you just changed? So it's like this back and forth between the IRBs. And that's what it's like at GHS. And so I try really hard not to do anything with GHS if possible, just because it's so hard to get through all that. It's time consuming. And that's the type of stuff that just like makes you want to pull your hair out. And then, so I look elsewhere. So that's why we don't. There isn't a lot. It's challenging.
Have you guys ever done, out of the faculty that's here, have you guys ever done like a rec, you're the rec therapy professor?
That's what I do. That's what we all do.
Right, but when it's published.
That's what we all do. Yeah, so I mean, we publish in the rec therapy journals, but there's only 2.
Right. Yep. So I just did a whole circle in my head for no reason. Yeah. I knew that. Yeah.
And so, but there's also this quest to get our information out to a broader audience too.
Yeah.
Which is why we publish in non-rec therapy and non-recreation journals. So Marika does a lot of yoga, stroke, and she publishes in big journals, way bigger than I'll ever publish in.
So I guess that's where not to overtake, sorry, but I guess that's where my mind was at. When you guys publish in those other journals, what you're providing them is a little bit more broad, and it's not so rec therapy.
It depends. So sometimes we want to get really rec therapy out there, and so it will be heavy rec therapy, even though it's not a rec therapy journal. And other times we will tone it down, so that we can just get something published without having to hit the barriers of, well, we don't know what you do. And, because journal articles are not the place to educate somebody about our profession, like 20 pages of, this is what rec therapy is. It has to be 1 paragraph of what rec therapy is. And if that's not sufficient, then we'll look elsewhere. Okay, so that's a very, very, very specific example of how a problem in practice and how research was able to, start to address that. But it gets complicated, and it's not always just like this easy, I'm going to fix this problem like this with the next study that I do, right? But I feel like it's better to be idealistic and think pie in the sky, like this is how it's going to happen. I'll put together this study and it'll work out like this, and then we'll be able to address this problem. What is it, the cliche, shoot for the moon and land in the stars if you miss type of a thing. So I totally missed on my thesis. I wasn't able to get like all the follow-up data. So I just had to analyze my pretest data. And in that sense, I just kind of generated this foundational knowledge about families who have kids in mental health treatment and what their family leisure looks like and how we're able to then, as rec therapists, how we could work with them. But that's a good starting place. That didn't exist before. So maybe that should have been my idea in the first place, but I tried to shoot for the moon and go for the intervention, right? So sometimes our research doesn't work out the way that we plan it. A lot of times it doesn't work out the way that we plan it, especially on intervention studies. So I'm looking at some of these comments in terms of what some of the problems are still in your practice.
I would say though, just going back to access, like as a practitioner, like the ATRA listserv website, a lot of studies people want to do are coming across there. And so, for example, I have one veteran who's a female veteran, and she's got PTSD, MST. MST is military sexual trauma. And so I found information through the ATRA listserv that some person over in Utah, professor at the University of Utah, wants to do outdoor whitewater rafting with veterans with PTSD, and they were asking for participants and such as that sort. So what I do is I take that information and I pass it out to my veterans. So that's another way as a practitioner is that we can practice good practice by taking that information and passing it along to our patients, because we can legally do that. We just can't legally be like, oh, well, I have a partnership with Jasmine over at Clemson. Here you go. Let me just shove you that way. But like we can give them the information, as well as like when I did my internship at NIH, like NIH stands for the National Institute of Health. And so it's a huge research hospital. So like hospitals of that sort as well want information to shove patients to therefore get them involved in studies. So it's like, it's out there. It's just as practitioners, we just kind of get bombarded with emails, and I've done it before, but I mean, it's just connecting the practitioner to the researcher and making sure that that partnership can continue, because VAs can do it all the time. We can just pass out information. It's just kind of that fuzzy thing.
Researchers can't call their research VA research, you know, and they wouldn't say anything in there about I'm partnered with a VA or anything, even if some of their people did come from a VA because somebody like Shannon said, hey, I know about this study, you might be interested, and they go and do it, but they're not officially sanctioned as like a VA researcher or research. But yeah, access is a huge issue to doing research, and that regardless of whether you're doing applied research or specific direct therapy or anything like that, access to your participants is one of the hardest things. And so for those of you who are just starting down this road to thesis land and project land, you should start thinking now, how am I going to get access to these rural women, or you know, faith-based or whatever, or where am I going to get these people from, especially living here in the upstate where we don't have a ton of options.
There are rural women though.
We are rural, so you count as a
I know
rural
what
woman.
you have.
For people with intellectual disabilities, I've always thought about the Clemson Life program,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of people in that program.
Yeah.
But they all have different disabilities, and if I did pick a specific disability, how would I do that?
You have inclusion criteria, and you set those criteria, and then you can pick who fits.
Okay, but do you think
And
that
it's okay
is
to say
good?
no to people.
Or like that's a
Potentially.
Clemson
Potentially, but you have to also consider that they're probably higher functioning than people who are not college students.
Yeah, that's true.
So that their ability to handle stress may be different than somebody who's not. And so then to develop a stress management intervention, you might have like a ceiling effect that they're already high functioning, and so they're not going to be there's not going to be a big amount of change there, as opposed to somebody who's lower functioning who gets your same intervention and is like, no. So you might not see any change, and that doesn't mean that your intervention doesn't work.
Yeah, but it would have a lot of limitations.
Yeah. Okay, good. So let's talk about the different types of research. What are the different types? And somebody asked a really good question in your comments about this in terms of like what type of research does a rec therapist do? So I was like, boom. But yeah, what are the different types of rec therapy, or the different types of research? Straight out of the reading.
Descriptive, exploratory, and experimental.
Yeah, okay, so define. What is descriptive research?
I just like this.
I know, I read it too long ago.
Say it again.
It like describes the population in general, and kind of more of what's normal in that area, or just what you see.
Sure. So we're not testing any hypotheses. We don't have necessarily any question or problem that we're trying to solve. We're just kind of generating information, describing a situation or describing a scenario. So this is like average scores of things, and that's all you really get. Averages and percentages and things like that.
So is that what your master thesis ended up being, since you didn't get to get the end results?
Nope, I did hypothesis testing in it. You can do hypothesis testing without like pre, post, and follow-up type of stuff. So yes, descriptive is just basic. I would say that this is the most basic type of research, is describing your population or your sample. Exploratory. So what is exploratory research?
It's like trying to find relationships, right? Like between two things or.
So here we start getting into having variables and looking at relationships and how things relate to each other. Use the word relationship to define relationship. But yeah, looking at relationships between variables, etc. What else does it say about it? Examines a phenomenon.
Correlational methods.
Yeah, so we have an idea about some things, but we're not really sure, so we're going to explore. I mean, there's a lot of times before you get into like the hard experimental design where you have like control groups and stuff, first you just want to see what's happening, so you might start with your population and try to understand from an exploratory level where we're just exploring things. Oh my gosh, I'm using the word to define itself. Pilot studies are exploratory, so small scale versions of what you want to do, and we're not really sure what's going to happen, so let's just start small and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then it crashes and burns, and so we don't do it that way.
Do you feel like a lot of rec therapy falls into exploratory research?
A lot of rec therapy falls into all of this. Okay. So we'll get there in 1 second. Experimental research, what is that? I kind of gave you a hint. An experiment. Okay.
It's like hypothesis, controlled groups, and
So you like plan and design.
it seems much more like intense.
It's more rigorous,
Yeah.
for sure. It's the most rigorous type of research.
Most scientific.
Yes, so we have things like control groups. We have multiple testing periods. So whether it's just pre and post, or pre and post and 3 month and 6 month and 12 month and whatever. So multiple, that's a longitudinal study. What is like the gold standard of the most rigorous you can get in an experimental design?
Randomized control trial.
Randomized control trial, right there, RCTs, yeah. So that is where you have a control group and an experiment group, and your participants don't know which group they're in, and you can have a double-blind randomized control trial where even the researchers don't know who's in what group. Okay, so you guys are Grey's Anatomy fans?
Yes.
Remember way back when Meredith like tried to control who got into the brain study?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so, you know, what's his name, Derek?
Derek.
Didn't know who was in, but then she accidentally found out who was in which group and tried to switch somebody into, who was it?
Was it her mom?
She was trying to get her mom into like some brain research.
She found out her mom was in the
Yeah, it was like a
control
drug
group.
to help with Alzheimer's.
So she pulled some strings to get her into the experiment group, and the whole study got shut down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look at that, how Grey's Anatomy ties into applied research.
It always teaches me.
It teaches so many lessons.
I know. I could be a doctor based on
Yeah.
watching all that. No. Anyways, okay, so very, very rigorous. Now, experimental design research is really, really hard to do. It's very time consuming, and that's the research that costs money. It takes a lot of resources. And so sometimes you can do quasi-experimental design. So you may not have a control group, and in that sense, it would be quasi-experimental. So when I did my thesis and I set up this little intervention that I wanted to test, I didn't have a control group in there. So I was a quasi-experimental design, but I had a pre and a post and follow-up. And I had a hypothesis, and I was testing all of these, variables. So I didn't do randomized. So the dilemma with randomization is that it's really hard in practice to randomize people into treatment or control group. how do you, well, there's some ethical issues of that too. If you firmly believe that your yoga treatment is going to reduce somebody's depression, how do you say to this group, you can be in the control group, and this group that you can be in the experiment group? So you get the yoga treatment and you don't.
Wait, why can you repeat that?
In randomized controlled trials, some people get the treatment and some people don't. But there's ethical concerns with that. If you think that that treatment is going to be a life-saving whatever, or not life-saving, but maybe life-saving for depression, but how do you do that? How do you say, well, you can have it, but you can't?
Can you, like after the experiment's over, can you offer the treatment to the group that didn't actually get it?
Yep. And that's called a delayed treatment control group. And so you'll have your study run where you have the treatment group and a control group. So the treatment group gets the yoga, the controlled group doesn't. You go through your 12 weeks of the study. And then at the end of that, the control group that didn't get it, they will get the 12 weeks of treatment. And they may or not, their doing of the treatment is not part of the study, but they still get it. Just in case, you may not have any results at that point, but just in case this yoga is life-changing, they get the treatment. So this might not be a big deal for something like yoga, but when we're talking about drug studies, cancer treatments, things like that, how do you say yes or no? It's hard. Sorry, I guess so.
So instead of being placebo, when you write it up, it would be like delayed response treatment option.
Delayed treatment control groups. Yeah. So Marika does a lot of this with her yoga research, where she'll have a control group and a treatment group, and then the control group will get the yoga intervention after the study is over.
I just took the certification where you can study humans, it's like
the city
I'm
training.
in the research group.
Yeah.
I just took it today. It's like all this is making sense to me, and if I hadn't taken it before today, I would have been completely clueless. But IRB is now.
Yeah, way to go. But yeah, so this is experimental design. So anytime we're talking about control groups and longitudinal testing, so pre-post follow-ups, anything like that, is experimental. And there's like the top tier of that where it's random assignment to the groups, blinded, so the participants don't know, double blind, the researchers don't know. So that literally there is someone like envelopes with names in it in terms of who's going into which group, type of secrecy. Yeah. But again, it's really, really hard to do. So what do you guys think in terms of rec therapy research? What kind of research do we do? What you've read out there, maybe what you've seen floating around in terms of our research?
Quantitative.
Oh yeah, we've got quantitative and qualitative, but those are, descriptive, exploratory, experimental can be both qualitative and quantitative. So that's not really like a fourth type. It's just, but qualitative has to do with more subjective data. Quantitative is more objective. So think numbers and words. So numbers is all quantitative, words, interviews is all qualitative.
I've seen some experimental and some exploratory, because when I did my research project on our implementation, the implementation evaluation class, your class when we did the yoga, did we do Alzheimer's? I can't remember. No, that was Brett's class. Okay, mental health class. We did Alzheimer's, and then we did snoozing therapy or like multi-sensor stimulation. When I was looking up that stuff, there was a lot of experimental research about they would have a control group that didn't get any of the stimulation, and they'd have an experimental group who did, and then there was like charts and graphs and stuff like that. But other things that research for other classes didn't have that much. It was just kind of exploratory or something like that.
And exploratory still produces knowledge, and so does descriptive, but experimental stuff produces a different kind of knowledge. So when we want to talk about outcomes of our practice, we need to be able to test the changes over time to say that by coming to my program, you can have a reduction in this or an increase in this. Well, that means I need to see you beforehand and I need to see you after, and potentially a follow-up. Well, as soon as you start throwing out those types of ideas about how you're going to collect that data, it starts to categorize it into one of these types of research. So that's where we go from, well, I'm not really sure what's going to happen in this. Let's just see. And that's kind of an exploratory thing, to where I think that this is what's going to happen. And I want to test to see what that changes, pre, post, and follow up. And now we're moving into experimental.
But wouldn't we want more experimental? Just 'cause, I mean, in my opinion, it increases the validity.
Absolutely.
I feel like that was because there's a control group.
The experimental design research is what we need for reimbursement issues, for licensure issues, to say that our stuff works.
Yeah.
You know, so I do all this research with veterans, and there's tons of programs out there that are, you know, popping up left and right. And we don't really have any for sure knowledge about what these programs produce in terms of outcomes. We kind of have an idea, because as practitioners, I know that good things happen when you take people out into the woods, into nature, right? But there's nothing that's actually like measuring that until I come along and I do those studies to measure it. And if I'm going to go and ask the government for money to fund my program, would it be better to have something that says, when we do this over the course of a year, this is what we saw happen, and here's the trend in their PTSD symptoms, as opposed to, I think this is a great program. Or what mostly is out there is, you know, Joe Bob veteran says, I went to this fly fishing program and it was great, and I had such a wonderful time that I stopped taking my meds and I feel better and I sleep better. Okay. What do we think about that type of data?
Well, it could be because of anything. It could be eating something different. Or,
it depends on how it was collected.
Yeah.
If it's just Joe Bob saying, I feel better, then that's just his personal testimonial, which is good insight, right? But can you take that to the government and say, fund my program because Joe Bob had a good time?
No.
It's just one person.
No. Even if we have 100 people that say, I had a good time. If it's not collected in a rigorous manner, a systematic manner that says, I followed this procedure, this process to get this data, and was validated by other people, and et cetera, and this very tight process to produce the Joe Bob had a great time and he stopped taking his meds and he stopped doing this, then it's just a personal testimonial. And that's a lot of what is floating around out there, in particular with veterans programming. And so you can go to the website of any one of these programs, non-VA type things, and they've got testimonials of people saying, I've been coming for this long and I've noticed these changes. That is fantastic. As a practitioner, I'm thinking, woo, right? But as a researcher, I'm thinking, okay, well, that's just Joe Bob telling me he had a good time, right? And as a funder, I want something more.
Yeah.
It could have been from anything too. He could
Sure.
he could have developed a relationship with the counselor, and then the
Sure.
information he provided is biased or skewed.
Sure, there's a lot of
But there's
confounding
not.
factors there that if there's no systematic way that data was collected, we never know what really causes these changes in people,
Yeah.
right? We hope, and I think deep down in our practitioner souls, we know that our services are making a difference, right? But if there's nobody measuring it quantitatively or qualitatively in a systematic manner, we don't really know.
Yeah.
So you'll see stuff floating out around there. We are getting much better in the research that we do produce. We are getting much better in moving towards the experimental design. I think the reading last week, the Bedini article, she talked about what research looked like 50 years ago, and that it was all just kind of like descriptive, very basic, and nothing, can't make any conclusions off of anything like that. It's just, okay, this is what it looks like. We're painting a picture of what average PTSD scores among veterans who are returning after OEF and OIF. Well, okay, now what do I do with that? Good, they have clinical levels. Now I know. So then we have to take it to the next level. Well, what could potentially impact those clinical levels of PTSD? Well, let's try this, this, and this. And then that's kind of like an exploratory. We don't really know what the outcomes are going to be. And so we'll measure a couple of times, but we're not sure. And then nothing changes. So we try some other things so that we can do this kind of progression in our research. But we've been getting much better at moving towards experimental design. We still have a long way to go.
Are all the theses, are they all experimental? No.
Nope. You can do whatever.
Really?
Within reason. Yeah. We have a committee that approves it, but it's really hard to do experimental design. Testing and intervention would be experimental design. That could even be exploratory to some degree, but as soon as you are testing and intervention, the time just takes longer.
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking about a 12-week yoga intervention, that's 12 weeks between your pre and your post test. And if that's a whole semester.
Yeah.
And so if you are thinking that you want to do pre and post and a follow-up, well,
Yeah.
how much longer after they complete your program are you going to measure their functioning again? 3 months? Well, now that's 6 months. That's half a year.
Yeah.
So within like the time constraints of a thesis, an experimental or an intervention, testing an intervention is a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
In a dissertation, a little bit easier because you have a third year.
Yeah, I was just thinking like 3 just turned into 4 though. For some people, really easy.
Depends on what type of intervention you want to test too. So, I mean, I developed a program, I designed a program and implemented and tested it in my dissertation, but my program was 3 days long. And I did follow up on it, but it was like at 2 and 6 months. And so within that time frame, I was able to analyze like half my data while I was waiting for the other data to roll in. So if we're talking about the time commitment to do our research, we're constrained by time, not just as graduate students, but even as practitioners,
I was
right?
going to ask that.
Because as
for
a
you.
practitioner, like how much time do you have to do all of this on top of your caseload?
Well, and like, yeah, see, like in talking about like all the faculty has to do research and stuff. I mean, most of you are married with kids and like you work full-time jobs and like where do you research? Like, how do you do that during the day?
In the summer when there are no students around.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Okay. I just wondered, like,
that's why we're like never here. Like when people email us in the summer, we're like, stop emailing. I'm kidding. No, we have like 10 projects going on all at once, and data is always rolling. Sorry. Data is always rolling in, and so it's always happening. And so, I mean, really, you have a lot of irons in the fire. But that's not how it would work in practice, because you can't have 10 projects going on in practice, right? If you're lucky, you could do one at one time.
So could you start, like, could you teach your intern how to start it?
Collect data.
Collect the data.
How about incorporate data collection into your practice so it's already happening? You don't have to do anything extra on top of your practice.
That's how I did my master's.
Say that again.
Can you say more about that, Jasmine?
Yeah, it's already built into what we do. We do assessments and we do evaluation. We are already collecting data. Now, some people collect data with instruments like, Bob's depression inventory. That's not a very... No, I'm being sarcastic.
Oh.
Bob's depression inventory. Sorry.
I was like, what?
Okay. No. Bob's depression inventory from like Cosmo magazine, right?
Okay.
Sorry. So people are collecting data with instruments that are not validated. They're not, good things. So we have our big red book of instruments, right? The big red book of rec therapy assessments and stuff like that. How many of you guys use things out of that book?
I've tried.
Yes. So there are varying levels of quality in terms of the big red book. And yeah, it's a big fat book. And it's not specific to rec therapy. There's so much in there that is outside of our field, and that's totally fine. But if for example, I'm trying to think of one of the scales that's in there.
I've been playing around with the vitality measures. Have you?
Yeah. So Haley's saying she just designed a program that's going to use that. But so let's use that. If you say that you have an intervention that is going to impact vitality, I'm assuming this is with an older adult population.
Yes, because right now that's actually honestly, it's the rebranding of our rehab is that we are focusing on people's vitality. So I found that measure and I thought, oh, this could be a really cool thing to track, to actually get rec therapists in thinking about rehab and then trying to track with that tool some benefits.
Okay, so you have this instrument. Your program is branded as impacting vitality in a positive way. So you bring your clients in and you give them this vitality measure before they do anything because it's part of your assessment, right? So you find out they have low vitality. So then put your rec therapist hat on. What are we going to do now? We're going to come up with a treatment plan, right? And then we're going to come up with the whole process of implementing that treatment plan, and then we're going to implement it again. We should, next step, evaluate at some point. So let's say you have an 8-week program aimed at impacting people's vitality, then after the 8 weeks, we measure their vitality again with that same instrument. And then we should see some change from before the program to after the program, right? That's what we do as a rec therapist. That is our job as a rec therapist. That is applied research. It is already happening in practice if you're doing the job of a rec therapist, following the API process appropriately and using validated, well-developed measures. Now, like I said, some people use Bob's depression inventory and whatever, or they make up their own thing to do because they don't know how to find it. The Big Red Book doesn't offer something that they want, or they have a facility that won't pay for them. Like they found something online and they think this would be the best thing ever, but it's $800 to buy it, and their facility said no. So they make up their own version of it. Can't use that. You cannot publish anything off of that, and I wouldn't even trust the results that you would find off of that.
So how much, like, when do you have a reasonable pool of evidence? Like, at what's the topping point? You know, whenever we do surveys and studies, we say you have to have a response of no less than 20 before it even starts to be reliable data. So if you're doing a project like that where you're testing, when does it start becoming reliable?
So sample size matters, and it depends on what your research question is. So imagine your research question being a pie, and you want to look at all of these different variables. So you want to look at depression, and you want to look at, I don't know, depression and self-esteem and whatever. So each slice of the pie is one of the variables that you're looking at. You need to have a certain amount. You need to have a certain size pie in order to be able to take a ton of slices out of it, right? So if you're only looking at one thing, you can get by with 30-ish people only looking at depression. I think it also, but if you're looking at depression plus this, as you add more things, more slices of that pie, you take more slices of the pie out, you need a bigger pie to be able to handle. This is all from a statistical standpoint, the analysis, you know, the more slices you take, the bigger pie you have to have. So, but from a practice standpoint, if you only have one person going through your program at a time, that's a lot of resources for one person in terms of implementing an intervention, right? It might take you a really long time to accrue 30 people. So maybe you're able to set up some type of policy that says every 10 people that complete the program will crunch the numbers and see what's happening. I don't know, and that's kind of specific to your program, your case size, your caseload size, your facility size. There are some programs that have tons of people coming through, and they'll have 80 people potentially fill something out all at once, or not. That would be a huge program, a huge rec therapy program. But think about like community rec, where they have a ton of participants all the time. Jake, how many Special Olympic athletes do you work with at once?
Honestly, it depends on the sport that we're doing. Like we just had Masters bowling 2 weekends ago, and we took about 50 people total down to, where was it, Warner Robins, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And in October, middle of October, we have bocce ball, and I'll be on a unified team for that. So I'm really pumped about that. I won a gold medal last year. I think we're taking 69 people total for that.
So are these like seasonal sports?
They are. They are.
So a season being what, 3 or 4 months?
Yeah, about 3 months with practices, and then a 1 weekend of competition.
Yeah, so let's use your bowling that's a really good example, a program that has roughly 50 people come through. Holy cow, right? So that's in one season you could get 50 people. You could do something. Let's say you want to measure their social skills. Okay, so you have some type of social skills inventory, functioning inventory that you give them before they start doing the weekly practices of bowling. And then after that final competition at the end, you give them that social skills inventory again and see what's changed. And then, hey, let's see if 4 months after they've still maintained that functioning. We'll do it again. So you've got 50 people 3 times is better than 100 people once. So it totally depends on what type of study you're doing, how many slices of that pie that you're taking out in terms of how many people you need to be in your sample. Does that answer your question, Kate?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, because I'm obviously looking at programs where we have some buildings where they have, 50 discharges a month, 60 discharges a month. I mean, I've got buildings that are, doing quite the volume. So that's interesting. Especially, it's hard. It's definitely hard to get, some of our customers, patients, whatever you want to call them, to respond to surveys. So it's trying to think about how you get it, and you get it in a valid way.
Well, and it's especially hard when, as soon as they leave your facility or whatever, and they go home, they're discharged, or once they're gone, it's really, really hard. So we always have our response rate over time. Somebody needs to mute their mic. So I'll give you an example of like the worst response rate thing I had. I spent a year collecting this data. We did pre and post, which was a 1 week time frame. And then we did 3 and 6 month follow-up, but it was kind of like this rolling enrollment in the program for the pre and the post. So we spent 6 months collecting pre-test data. Every week they had a new group come. So every week I was giving out pre-tests, and then every week I was doing post-tests. So finally at 6 months, I said, okay, I've got 166 people that filled out the pre-test and the post-test. And in the process of that, I timed out when they would take the 3 month and when they would take the 6 month. So I had 166 people at pre-post. At 3 month, it dropped down to 100. And at 6 month, it dropped down to like 3. Yeah, I couldn't get anybody to fill out that 6 month one. They did not want to stay engaged with me for that long. They just wanted to do their little thing and be done. And I was like, I need that 4th time point. I need that 6 month follow-up, because I'm trying to look at trends over time. The more points I have over time, the better picture I can see of what happens to this was veterans, what happened to their PTSD, their depression, their anxiety as it goes. But if they don't fill it out, then I don't know. And so
What'd you do?
Offered an incentive, $10 a $10 Walmart gift card. Yeah. I didn't end up getting anybody to fill out more at the 6 month, and I had to put that in my limitations, that I had really low response rate at my follow-up time points. And so, people took it the 3 month follow-up past the 3 months, but I, was not awesome.
I think that was so disappointing.
It is, especially because I can't be at those facilities to like interact with those people. If you can see people and they know who you are, they're more likely to fill out your stuff. So that's why in practice, doing research in practice as a practitioner is way better, because you know your participants, they know you, they don't know me. I don't know them. I can't go to your facility. I can't come there and, give a handshake and a warm hug and say, welcome to my study. That's where the access problem becomes a problem for faculty researchers. So we just don't have that access. And so if you guys have the skills and abilities to do that in practice, build it into your practice so that it's already happening through your assessment and evaluation process, you'll have a better response rate than I would if I did it for you, never coming to your facility. Yeah, so what do we think about research in practice? Are you freaked out about the thought of having to do this?
I think it's very cool. I mean, I'm actually very excited about it.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. I try to like hit this over and over again. It's already like the foundation to do it is already there in our practice. We just have to structure our assessments and our evaluations in such a way that we're using good quality measures, and that there's a little rigor in how the intervention is delivered, which means rec therapist A and rec therapist B working in the same program are delivering those services the same way. Because if you do it different than you do it, but we measure everybody the same, and then we see these like crazy changes, is it because our intervention didn't work, or is it because you guys implemented it differently and they had totally different experiences? So there's a lot of control around how we, this is the research control that is very hard to do in practice, because we want to tightly control how services are provided. And some facilities are like, no, you can't come in here and do that. You can't control what time of day everybody gets their service. their rec therapy. Rec therapy happens whenever we have time to squeeze it in, right? But what we're saying is that I want it to happen every single day at the same exact time for this period of time. And a lot of facilities are like, whoa, 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 who do you think you are coming in here? You don't work here. Like, I've had people say things like that to me, like, you don't understand the reality of practice. All right, I was a practitioner. I do understand. It's better to have me here working with you to do this than nobody or some random person who really doesn't understand practice, right? But we hear that a lot, is we can't do this study. This doesn't fit within our daily life of practice. That's part of the process of developing a relationship with these facilities to get in to do research. Tell me, what is the day in the life of a rec therapist at this facility look like? Or what is the day in the life of anybody working here? Because rec therapy might be this much of a component of it. So paint me that picture. What does it look like? And as a researcher, I'd rather design a study that fits in seamlessly and doesn't screw up your day, as opposed to just thinking what people think we do is just walk in and say, oh, I am here, you will do what I say, you know, and that it's not realistic for practice. That's not what I try to do. I know that's not what Marika tries to do or what Brent tries to do. So, but that's the challenge, is getting people at facilities to be on board with us coming in. And we may have to make small changes to make something tighter, a little bit more rigorous, and not just fly by the seat of our pants research, because that stuff won't get published.
So one thing that I'm kind of playing through in my head, and so I just changed our quarterly assessments. And so, you know, everybody within our building, we need to do a progress report on in 90 days. And I actually beefed up our responses section so that I can see, you know, occurrences of displaying agitation and aggression, those different things. What I'm trying to figure out in my head is, how do you discern between your interventions and possible other counter intuitive interactions that could work against your process? So, you know, nursing's involved and social services involved, and so that's where my head's kind of going right now. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so we call those confounding variables. So are these reductions in PTSD? Sorry, I'm always going to go back to like veterans because that's where my brain always works. Are these reductions in PTSD due to my intervention, or is it because you got on a new medication, or is it because you're also doing some other non-rec therapy based treatment, like talking to a psychiatrist or whatever? If I can't control for all of those pieces, I will never know if it's what I'm doing is making the difference, or if it's any one of those other things by itself, or it's the combination of it all. Okay, likely it's the combination of it all. I don't believe for a second that rec therapy is the end all fix to any problems, right? And especially when you're talking with people who have like such complex issues, really, and everybody has complex issues, okay? So it's all about the type of, in terms of like a research study or trying to collect that data, is how tightly you can control for those other factors. This is where having a control group comes in. So let's say you have a group of veterans who are receiving only rec therapy, and then a group of veterans who are receiving rec therapy plus all that other stuff. And then I can see the change. Now I've isolated the effects of rec therapy. I can see directly what those people are doing, and I can compare against what the people who are getting kind of the standard everything type of thing. That's the type of study where you can say rec therapy does this. But how do you do that in practice, where you have all those same veterans in the same facility? How do you say, well, this group is only going to get rec therapy, and this group is going to get rec therapy plus psych plus meds plus this? It's hard in practice. It's really hard to say.
They're all paying money to get all those other services, and if you take them away, they're going to be like, well, I'm here to get help, and if you're pulling me out of all this, you know, then I get mad.
It's really, 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 really hard to set up studies like that. And so
other disciplines do it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the details of how it all comes together. A lot of stuff happens in a lab. So that's the other thing. We are not like an isolated profession, right? We don't do things in labs. We don't operate in these kind of like sterile environments, right? We've got crap going on, in everybody's lives, right? So community programs, they don't live there. They go home and they come back every day for their mental health treatment and community mental health. So they've got the family member who doesn't support what they're doing in mental health in their treatment. And so they leave the knives out even though they're on suicide watch. They leave all this other stuff, you know, it all influences them. So how can we really understand behavior and the impacts of our treatments and interventions when we have all of this external stuff happening? It's incredibly difficult. But this is why in other professions, you see a lot of research happening in labs where they bring families into a room. I actually have a friend who's doing this research, and she wants to understand how the interactions between family members while they do family leisure. And they are literally wearing, they have to hang these things around their neck. It's like a little box like this big, and it can measure the distance between people. And so while they're playing the games, they're playing like Monopoly and Chutes and Ladders and stuff in this closet-sized room. And she's got video cameras kind of like peering on them all the time. And she wants to see how they interact with each other. Like, does this family leisure activity cause people to bond and whatever? And she's measuring actual physical closeness.
Do they know what's being measured?
To some degree, but not fully. Lots. She's collecting data all the time. Well, she also offers incentives too. But she offers incentives. So if you come and do this, I'll give you a $50 gift card. You guys can go out to dinner. Okay, so she got it funded, which is great. Okay, but that's not research in practice. Okay, that's research in a lab.
Yeah.
Right. So how would we, if I want to try to understand how family interaction helps develop bonding and closeness and everything, but I can't do it in a sterile lab, I have to do it in practice. It's called in vivo, like in real life. How the heck would you do that? How would I measure? I guess I could do the same thing. I could go into their home and have them wear these little things, and I could be like the fly on the wall, just kind of watching what's happening while we have like family night and they're playing some games in their living room, and I want to see, and they measure. But, you know, it's awkward, you know, because you want them to have an authentic experience, but they've got these weird things hanging from their neck.
Yeah. When you can't really know, I mean,
yeah,
it's just human nature. You would change your behavior.
It changes your experience.
Yeah.
But she's not measuring a subjective experience. She's measuring an objective experience based on the measurement that this thing is able to measure, your closeness, your physical closeness to people. I don't know. It's really interesting. She also told me that she ran into some barriers because she had a little kid. One of the kids in the family was wearing it, but he's small, so he was sitting down this low. But these things, it's kind of like laser tag, where you have to be in view of the person's like
It didn't catch
thing.
it, did it?
No, because his was lower and it was underneath the table. So they made him sit on phone books so that his sensor could be above the height of the table. She's like, I had no idea. But it wasn't until I did my first couple of families and I screened the initial data that I noticed that none of the kids' data was registering. And it's because their thingy was down below the table. Quick change, right?
Yeah.
But so again, in practice, it's really hard to do stuff like that. There are a lot of barriers to doing super duper rigorous research that leads us to be able to say we can never say with 100% certainty anything that we never prove anything, by the way, with research, right? We strongly recommend and suggest and types of things, but we cannot prove things. But it's very hard to do the rigorous level of research needed to be able to say with any certainty that this is this and this happens based on this when you do research in practice. And those are just the challenges. So we try to do the best that we can. We try to be as tight as we can with our measures, as tight as we can with the implementation of our interventions and the measurement of those interventions, and then we do the best we can. And the key is to get it out there and to publish it. Because I do think that there is a lot of research that happens in practice that people just don't publish it. And so we don't know. There's a lot of program evaluation that happens in practice because it's necessary for boards of directors, you know, the bosses, the hospital directors, et cetera, et cetera. It just doesn't go anywhere beyond the facility. And that's unfortunate because that's the stuff that could be really beneficial to all of you as you're searching about those programs, right?
Yeah. Isn't it kind of hard to get published?
Well, yes, but you guys are all learning the skills. So not to say that you're going to go out there and just be like, oh yeah, I'll just publish something. No, it does take time. And there's a certain level of skill needed to do something like that. You've got to be a good writer to some degree, or have a co-author who's a better writer than you. You know, there's lots of ways to get stuff out there, and there are a lot of avenues and places where we could put our stuff.
Yeah.
That's going to be a discussion for a whole nother day in terms of who actually reads it. Yeah, so that's coming down the road. Okay, so I hope that we had a good discussion about theory today. Well, we didn't even get to theory. Oh, dang. We'll skim over that next week.
There was a lot of good notes that people put and responded to.
Yes, so I wanted to say in those lines, you guys had fantastic comments this last week, and as I was reading through over the last couple of days, I've been wanting, like, my fingers are itching to comment, but then I found myself getting stuck that I would spend all day commenting on people's stuff. So I just let you guys comment on each other's stuff, because most of you had answers that I was going to say anyways, or responses that similar to what I was going to say. So I figured what I would do is just let you guys talk amongst yourself during the week in the discussion threads, and then I'll try to tie it all in here. So hopefully we covered some stuff. I think we did cover stuff that I saw in the questions in there. So we're good. We will probably pick up the discussion about theory next week, because it is important to what we're talking about. But yeah, it's not like a quiz or anything, so we'll pick that up. TIS forms next week, and I hope that we won't be afraid of research. And as this course progresses, that we'll all be like, yeah, I can do this. It's already part of what I do. I'll just tighten it up a little bit, and yeah. Partner with a professor or grad student at a university and help get it published. It's our job. We have to do it. So we're all about helping practitioners do it. So, all right, any questions about anything? Nope.
If we have questions, I'll email you.
Always.
About the TIS.
Always email. All right, have a good night.
Oh,
See
about
ya
the central tomorrow.
next week.
Does everyone like guacamole?